We'll start recording. So good evening. Thank you for being here tonight. One thing that I just want to go over is that I appreciate all of the campus visits that we've been making. And that was really brought us to the place we are tonight, where we have a very simplified version of a guidance for our artifact. So I'm going to open that up for us. And just a reminder, I can't see the chat box. So if there's something going on, if there's somebody will come off of mute, that would be great. And I want to make sure I can see all participants in case somebody else joins. Awesome. Okay, so we're going to go over Artifact 2 of the Reading Academy, which is an extension or completion of the adaptive action process. In your simplified template, if you'll make sure to make a copy of your own, and if you would put your last name in the title, then when you share it with me, that makes it a lot easier when I have it open to know who to send the feedback to. In the template, you'll see that I've linked in the PowerPoint, and I've also linked in the training video. The first training video goes into a lot more detail. So if you feel like after tonight's session you need more information, you can access that artifact training video as well as the PowerPoint. Just a reminder, the PowerPoint takes you through step by step. So I've taken the instructions from Canvas and I've highlighted step by step what we're going to do in this artifact. And so the purpose is to sustain our literacy community. And in that, we're going to go through the process of finishing out our first adaptive action cycle. So in Artifact 1, Module 4, we looked at some data. And from that data, we found a pattern that was concerning to us or that was positive, either way. And then once we had that pattern, we talked about the impact it has on our kids. And then because we're great educators, we took action. If it was a negative pattern, we wanted to dampen it. If it was a positive pattern, we wanted to broaden it. And that's where we stopped on Artifact 1. And so to complete the cycle of adaptive action, we're going to pick up at that action step where we actually took action, and we're going to finish out the cycle. So in part 1 of this artifact and it's got 2 tabs in Canvas. On part 1, the first thing is to reflect on that module 4 artifact. So all you need from module 4 is your actions, your action steps. And so when you're there, you're going to restate them. So for example, when we were in our first module, some of us talked about maybe implementing the PLC learning protocol where you unpack the TEKs. Or maybe you just said, hey, we're going to learn or implement the new curriculum. But now that you've been in the work, you know that you had to implement like the learning protocol. So you do have freedom to change the wording from Artifact 1 and just highlight what you actually did. Maybe you created a new campus schedule that set aside dedicated intervention time. And maybe that's new and it wasn't on your list from the first artifact. That's fine. Part 1 is just what actions did you have from your previous artifact? So you have the freedom to reword. Please be brief. So if you had a long statement in order to support students to read better, we're going to do blah, blah, blah. Make sure you make it brief and straight to the point about what your action was, because we are under a 600 word limit on this particular artifact. So we need to be under 600 words. And you're really going to want to have your words at the bottom, which will be planning for next year. So in part one, we're going to start with our actions, however many you have. It doesn't have to be any certain minimum or maximum, just as long as you have some action steps. And then we're going to pause and talk about what other external conditions were happening on our campus that may have affected the impact of our actions. So implementing a new curriculum, huge. We should see great gains because we're implementing a strong, explicit, systematic curriculum. We should see great gains with our kids. However, we're doing it during a pandemic. So that could be an external factor that maybe affects increased absences from students and staff. Since we're implementing all these actions within a pandemic, we also, for the first time, are teaching both virtual and in-person learners, right? Which means our teachers and everybody had to learn Schoology, a new platform. So whatever you feel affected your implementation, that's the conditions you want to pick. We need at least 2, but you don't have to go into any kind of real big detail. Just list what it was. A new curriculum could be here too. New ELA, SLA curriculum. If you are a target campus, if you got a grant, you took on a new grant, maybe you're a specialized magnet school, all of that can play into how it affects the actions that you took. Okay, so whatever conditions affected your actions, that's what you want to list. And remember, these are like external conditions, ones that you have no control over, decisions that were already made for you. So if it's a district-wide thing, a reorganization on your campus, you got new admin because we switched things around, so our team has not been together that long, anything like that externally would affect your the impact of your action steps. Okay, so we're talking about our actions. We're working within these other external conditions. And then you're just going to briefly tell us about your data gathering process. So who pulls the data? If your leadership team pulls it, then you could just put a campus leadership team pulls the data from, and if it's M-Class, if it's Circle, if it's benchmark, if you have your own DCA data, like whatever you want to list is fine. But you want to tell us who pulls it and then tell us the next step. Probably the team, the campus leadership team, analyzes it for some reason to identify strengths and weaknesses, to tier teachers, to recognize which kids are making progress. Do we have a strength or a weakness in our campus? So anything like that. And then I'm sure that the campus leadership team holds some kind of PLC data meeting. And in that meeting, you go over the data with the teachers, right? Or maybe the teachers are pulling it themselves and then they come and talk to you with it. So whatever your process is, that's all we need. Somewhere like 3 to 5 sentences is all you need of the process from pulling data to action. So if it's reviewed with the teachers and then we regroup students, or the teachers provide intervention, then based on that data, then that's all you need. Or maybe the teachers are implementing a new strategy in the classroom because you saw a campus-wide strength or weakness. So 3 to 5 sentences just telling us about your data monitoring process. Make sure that it aligns with some of your actions, because really this process should be monitoring whatever actions we put in place, but most of them will because they're going to overlap instruction. So we took our patterns, we acted upon them, we talked about what other factors might affect our progress of those actions. We're describing our data briefly, and then we're actually going to get evidence of, we're actually going to give evidence for these action steps. So if I implemented a learning protocol, my evidence might be an agenda where we implemented that and showed teachers that. It could be an agenda from a faculty meeting showing them how the learning protocol worked. It could be actually a protocol, a template. So there's no rules on what you put in, but you just want to give a brief sentence. So evidence 1 is an agenda from a faculty meeting where we introduced the learning protocol for the next cycle of learning walks, something like that. So all you want to do is just one sentence telling what the evidence is, and it needs to align with one of your action steps. All right. Then you're going to insert a screenshot. So you're going to actually go to your template. You're going to use this fabulous snipping tool. And all you're going to do is just grab a piece of it. When you grab the piece and it's on your screen, I'll teach you a trick if you don't know it yet. Someone taught me. I wish I remembered who it was because I owe them big time for saving hours of my life. So once you have it on your screen, if you minimize it and go straight back to your document and hit Control V, it'll pop whatever you just snipped straight into your document. And that's literally all you need to do.
Control what?
Control V as in Victor.
All right.
So you're going to snip it. Then you're going to minimize your snippet screen, I guess. Go to your document and press Control V as in paste. Okay. And that'll pop in what's right there. If you do something in between, you'll have to go back to your snippet and just click on it. So if you go to some other document, then you have to go find your snippet, click on it, and tell your computer like, hey, I need to look at the snippet again, and then you can go back and do it. So your evidence pieces are just going to be one sentence about what the evidence is, followed by a screenshot or a photo. Good news is that the photo is a photo. It does not count as words. So it doesn't matter how many words are on your picture. You don't need to worry about that at all. You're just going to snip it and go. If you're using some kind of student tracker that has student names, like a progress monitoring, so maybe it's a campus spreadsheet we use to monitor student progress. If it's anything with student names, please make sure that you do not snip the entire student name. So either hide the student name, don't snip the whole thing. So maybe only snip like 5 letters of the last name at the end of that column, something like that. We just want to make sure we're not violating FERPA and putting kids' first names, last names, putting them in danger by putting their location of where they're learning. Okay, so we want to make sure we don't include full student names. So just make sure you hide the name. If you're taking a photo with your cell phone, you can fold the paper backwards and not have names on it at all. So no one's grading to say, oh my gosh, is this really what they say it is? No one's grading that. You're just putting in an evidence sentence about what it is, and you're putting a snippet in. You only need 2 for full credit, but feel free to put in more for your own cycle. And so at that point, we have completed the entire adaptive action process for our first set of patterns. So in artifact 1, we found data. We located patterns from that data. Then we talked about the impact it had on our kids. And we said, now we got to act. Now we got to do something about it. Once we started acting, we have to pause and look at the progress, but we have to understand or identify these external conditions that may halt or plateau our progress. Then we're going to touch base on what our process for looking at the data was for these action steps. And then lastly, actually giving a snippet or an evidence piece showing we really did what we said we did. Then you're back at start again, which is part 2. So your part 2 is going to mimic our artifact 1 module 4. You're going to start with some new data and identify 2 new patterns. These do need to be literacy patterns, okay? So for example, been on campuses a lot. People are talking a lot about class and the impact that burst lessons are having on their kids. So what they're noticing is students who received intervention consistently are growing. And maybe they're showing growth of 1 or more levels. So if you're looking at class, if they moved from red to yellow or yellow to green or green to blue, then they're showing progress, right? Showing at least 1 level of growth. You can gauge it a lot of different ways between BOY and MOY. Okay. And so what you do is you just count and you'll get a percentage. So your pattern should just be 1 sentence. What is the pattern and where did you get it from? I caution you on using BOY data just because a lot of our BOY data is not valid because our kids were at home. And once we got back to campus, that data doesn't match anymore what they did at BOY. So you may just focus on MOY and go with something like percentage of students at MOY who mastered phonemic awareness or who did not master phonemic awareness or who are below grade level or well below. So any patterns, class is a solid, easy piece of data to look at for that. So feel free to do that. Then our implication, so same thing as before, we're going to want 1 sentence. Here it is right here. Let me move it past the pattern. Sorry, I started typing in the wrong spot. So we're only going to want 1 sentence, 1 to 2 sentences that state the impact, but it doesn't have to be students anymore. It can be students if you want. But if the impact is that kids who are receiving intervention are showing 1 level of growth, then that changes our whole campus system. Now we really got to make sure we start interventions earlier in the year. So it could have a campus impact. And I would just start with the implication for our campus is that we need to provide consistent intervention starting September 1st. And it might be consistent intervention for all students, because I know we're using Reading Amplify, which is an intervention. It could be intervention for students who are scoring well below, or below. So there's no rules, really. It's just you want to find your pattern from the data piece that you feel is valid and with what you've been doing on your campus, and then look at the impact it might have for either your kids or for your campus or for your teachers. So if you have 75% of students who are below or well below, so 75 are reading below grade level, That has an implication for your kids, we know, but it also has a huge implication for the next group of teachers who are getting those kids. So if it's 75% of first graders are scoring well below or below, the implication is that the second grade teachers are now going to have larger academic gaps to fill in. They're going to have to do a better job of planning, right, for those misconceptions. So just want to remind you that the implication can be student-based like it was the first round, but it can also be a broader piece of your community, like a grade level, your staff, or campus level. You're going to find a second pattern and do the same thing. So it's going to have a 1 sentence for the pattern and then 1 to 2 sentences for your implication. And then you're going to design actions. These are actions for next school year. And this is where I would spend my word count. Because if I know that interventions that have been consistent are making an impact for my kids, then one of my action steps is that we would start earlier in the school year with interventions, right? So one of my action steps might be something like we will use the EOY M-class data to create beginning of year interventions for students that will begin September 1st. I may also want to make sure that my campus or classroom schedules will reflect a dedicated intervention time. Some of them already do, but some of us started really late in the year. So implementing some of your action steps can from the first artifact may be copied over or being carried over because we didn't get to implement them until just recently because of all of the interruptions this year. So once I have those in place, then I want to make sure I have a progress monitoring system. So I would just go step by step on what I needed to do as a campus to ensure that that pattern that we know is great, is positive for our kids, continues even in a more efficient and effective way next school year. If you have actions that address only one pattern, you're welcome to put them underneath the pattern and tell us they're going to be implemented in the 2021-2022 school year. If you have actions that address both patterns, because both are literacy patterns, then you can just list them below as a group. So you do have freedom in what this looks like, but this is where I would spend my time. I also would encourage you to work with your APs and with your principal as an admin team to do part 2. Because if we're going to implement these actions next school year, it would be great for us to all be on the same page and have the same focus for our next school year and what the changes we're going to make on our campus are. So it is possible that your part 2s would look extremely similar. They shouldn't be word for word the same because everyone's writing it in their own language, in their own, word style. But they can be very, very similar for part 2. So part 2, you're starting that adaptive action cycle over, but you're not going to be able to implement your actions until next school year. And then probably at the quarter, at the 9 weeks, or at the semester, you're going to want to finish that process to make sure that we get all the way through the process. So in the chat box, I see, so the word count for the whole document should be under 600. However, and the easiest way to do that is there's a tool right here, word count, and it tells you right now we're at 303 words. You can have some leniency, but I'm saying like 700, 750 max. There's no easy way for our graders who are grading our artifacts to count word count. Okay, I'm a grader for 600 other people across the state. And it's when they upload into Canvas, I would have to take it, convert it from a PDF to something else that would then count the words. I don't have a way to count words within a PDF. I'm not doing that because by the time I did that, I could already been done graded with the rubric and been on to the next one already. And I think that's pretty much the norm right now. So as long as it's not like 5 pages long or 6 pages long, just try to keep it under 3, I would say. And if it's too long, you can always shrink your evidence a little bit so that it shortens the length of it. But if it was me, I would spend my word count down here in really organizing what we're going to do next year. One campus I worked with already like did phases. So like phase 1 for their questioning was going to be to use the CKLA questions and make sure that we had purposeful placement within the lesson for those questions. And then phase 2 was going to be building scaffolding questions between those CKLA questions and our placement of those. And then phase 3 was going to be monitoring that. And then phase 4 was going to be actually taking notes on kids' responses. So you can actually phase in what your processes are going to be. So this is your work to start next school year. And it's a great opportunity just to finish out the process of thinking through what actions we took and why we took them, and then looking at the impact that they had. On a normal year, which I don't even know if we'll ever have one of those again, but in a normal year, we would have seen a great increase with our curriculum implementation alone. But it kind of leveled out or plateaued. Our growth kind of looks plateaued because we had unvalid data in the beginning of the year, and because we had all these external factors. And so our systems were not consistent. When we have 18, 20 teachers gone in a day, there's no way to be consistent with our plan, right? So you're going to kind of level out. So it's okay if some of your patterns look very similar to your first round. And if some of your actions, if you're going to implement them again, it's okay for that to happen. So I'm going to stop the recording and then I will open it up for any questions that you all may have. I also